Hello, Sam here from the League One Lowdown Preview Show. Thank you to everyone who subscribed over the past week. We've gone up over 120 new people who have subscribed to the channel, so thank you very much. We're still at 78% of you who watch our podcasts and transfer episodes that aren't subscribed. So if you wouldn't mind hitting that subscribe button, that would mean a great deal to all four of us. So thank you in advance and enjoy the review episode.
Only one League One game survived the weather as Huddersfield Town made a statement signing. We'll cover that and all things FA Cup as that takes centre stage. And we also answer your questions. Welcome to the League One Lowdown review episode. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the League One Lowdown, brought to you by the Deck Podcast Network. As ever, I am Seb Jones, joined by Jamie Johnson for the review episode. Jamie, how have you been?
Oh, I'm miles better than I was last week, and I listened to that episode back, and it sounded as bad as it felt, my voice. But I'm a lot better this week. My voice is only struggling because I've been at the Doncaster Rovers Hull game today, and in that away end was quite the day. But I'm absolutely fantastic. So how are you?
Great, yeah, good, thank you. Yeah, good to see your voice does sound a lot better. I myself quite good to fair, yeah. Enjoying the snow and ice as that we seem to have accumulated over the past week or so. I think the fun has sort of been taken out of it a little bit. It's just become a bit of annoyance now. But whether you've got snow or not,
it became annoying as I was sat on Saturday thinking, we're going to be struggling for stuff to talk about on Monday, and then half an hour later there was only one game left on, and I was like, we're going to really be struggling. But actually, there's a lot to talk about, isn't there? As you mentioned, obviously the questions from the listeners we've got to answer, and then the FA Cup and a really big signing. There's plenty to talk about, and not business as usual in terms of it being all about the games, but still a packed show.
Yeah, so it's more of a bitty episode. We've got little bits going on, little bits to cover, and things to chat about, but certainly plenty to discuss and get into detail. All of which related to League One in some capacity. We'll start with the only game to make the cut in terms of League One fixture over the weekend. And the reason for this, before we get into the game, I don't know if you saw this, Jamie, but basically Rotherham United had got this basically like, I don't know, like massive hot air balloon. I don't know if that's the way you describe it, like just on top of the pitch.
Like a tent.
Yeah, like a tent, on their pitch to, I guess, help melt away the snow and the ice that has sort of accumulated over the past few days. And actually, that only got taken off. They had the lunchtime kickoff on Saturday, and that only got taken off the pitch on Saturday morning. So they only got the fully go-ahead just a few hours before kickoff. But that was in place at the New York Stadium a few days before, which is sort of really good to see. Sort of clubs going to drastic measures, I guess. But as I think we're going to mention today, we'd rather see games on than sort of fans travel and then have to turn back and whatnot. So credit to them, but obviously having to go to extreme circumstances. But it was the only survivor in terms of League One fixtures. Plenty of goals, plenty of talking points. I guess mainly off the pitch. We'll come to that in a little bit later off. But a solid result for Rotherham in the end, Jamie.
Yeah, no, definitely. That obviously 3-1 in the end. It was when I watched it was obviously the early kickoff, as you mentioned, and I thought it was a pretty entertaining game actually. I mean, Bolton probably started brighter, but after about 25 minutes, it was a really even game, and Rotherham just seemed to grow into it, and eventually they got that goal, which was about sort of slap bang on the half-hour mark from a penalty, and from there they just didn't look back. They sort of built themselves up to that point, and then as soon as they got that opener, they absolutely flew. They got the second in first half injury time with Reece James, his first goal for the club, obviously signed in the summer. And then it was really sort of business as usual and pretty easy stuff after that. They got a goal back, obviously, but Rotherham restored that 2-goal lead and saw the game out with obviously then coming into focus what was happening in the away end in terms of the chance and the big sign they had up that was shown on the Sky Plus feed a couple of times. But obviously we'll come to that, as you mentioned, Seb. But the game itself, I was really quite impressed with Rotherham. Obviously don't watch tons and tons of Rotherham United, but when I have seen them, they've not been this free flowing, because it wasn't hoofball or whatever word you want to put it that's sort of thrown at Steve Evans' teams. It was at times really fluid, and it was really good football, sort of dotted throughout, and they played really well. They're much the better team, obviously, and yeah, a deserved win. Malik Wilkes, the star of the show for me.
Yeah, and it was Wilkes that, as you mentioned, sort of got things off. Got the first goal in the game, and then it was Reece James that doubled the tally just before half-time. How crucial was that for Rotherham, having that 2-0 advantage at half-time going into the break against Bolton? How important was that 2-0 going into the break?
Yeah. I mean, they always say, you can chuck all them old adages at it's a great time to score, it changes the half-time team talk, but as much as obviously it's said all every time, it still makes it true. I mean, you're scoring it was the 5th minute of added on time at the end of the first half. It's that late on in the day that you're already halfway down the tunnel, and the ball was in the back of the net, and it was a really nice finish actually. It fell to him quite luckily, a bit of a ricochet, half cleared, and he set it out into the far corner really quite nicely, Reece James. It wasn't a fullback's finish. But yeah, I mean, it obviously it's a really crucial time to score, and it turned that game around at 2-0 at half time. You're thinking, well, it's almost game over with the way Bolton have been playing. If they don't turn up, they don't turn up. Bolton, I beg your pardon. And that seemed to be one of those games for them. I don't know how much you've seen of the game itself, Seb, but the penalty, it was really well taken actually by Malik Wilkes. Sort of that one of those stuttering run-ups, the Bruno Fernandes sort of run, if you like. But I think it's a red card that he wasn't given. He was booked, Santos. He sort of threw on goal, Malik Wilkes. It's a stonewall penalty. The lino gives it. And then it gives instruction to book him. But I think it's a red card. I don't know if you've got an opinion on that, because I think he's the masked man, and he should have sent him off. But in the end, obviously, it didn't make any difference.
Yeah, well, I have seen this, yeah. And I don't know, I'll probably agree with you. I can see why he's given the yellow, but you're right. It's one of those, you also, does the double jeopardy sort of come in? If he's given the penalty, should he give the red card? That sort of thing. I agree in terms of, I don't know, do I disagree in that I've seen some of those given against my team, seen the red card given. But I don't know. In terms of the game, I think a yellow card is right, because you've got the penalty, and for me, this is where double jeopardy comes into play. They've got the penalty. They've already got quite an obvious chance to score. They don't need, not that it's given on this instance anyway, but
no, I understand.
They don't need the red card. But I think yellow card, it definitely foul, definitely yellow card. It's one of those where
100%,
some people, I think some refs give it, some don't. And ultimately, Bolton have probably got a bit lucky, but not sort of managed to make the most of it, really.
Yeah, and I did want to correct myself. I've just been looked back at my notes, and I've watched a lot of football since this game. Obviously, only Saturday lunchtime. But they went 3-0 up. Dion Charles, what I've put is has to score. It was about the 60-something minute, and I don't know how he missed it. The ball came across from the left, and he was harder to miss, and he just put it over. So that was the best chance I had, really.
Yeah, that's going to be disappointing, isn't it? To get the goal for 2-1, and then
100%.
Like I said, there was so much.
No, that was to say that would have made it 2-1. Missed, and then they made it 3-0, and they got the goal really late on. But yeah, the game had gone by that point. Yeah,
that Charles chance, it would have been, a 2-1. It would have been 25 minutes to grab an equaliser, and then it's a different game entirely, isn't it? Really, but as you said, in the end, Rotherham got that third before Bolton did score late. So Wilkes, James, and Nombe, the scorers for Rotherham, and for me, I think it not to sort of, I guess, downplay Rotherham, but like you said, they played some good football and have done over the past few weeks. And they're now 4 unbeaten, pushing up the league. We all know he's not been good enough at Rotherham this season. We've spoken here many times that it just hasn't been good enough. But they're now 13th, which is higher than it has been in recent months.
Yeah.
Unbeaten in 4, 3 wins within that as well, and they're looking good. They're playing good football, as you mentioned earlier as well.
Yeah, definitely. That's the main thing. I mean, it's something we spoke about today. I mentioned obviously the game I was at today, walking into the ground. It's something we talked about in terms of if your team goes on a run, no matter if it's a positive, if you're winning 4 or 5 games in a row, or the opposite direction, you lose 4 or 5 games in a row, that can completely flip your season around. And you go on those little runs, and it makes the world a difference. And Rotherham are in one of those patches at the minute where they've just hit a purple patch, and they're playing really good football. They're getting the results that match, and they're looking up. And that sort of run like this, if they can stretch it on a couple more weeks, they're going to be knocking on the door of the playoffs, and they're going to be back up to where obviously we expected them at the start of the season. And you don't win anything for being in the playoffs at Christmas. You win for being in the playoffs at the end of the season. And it doesn't really matter how they get there. If they take the long way round, going around all the houses and being in down the relegation zone at the start of the season, if they get there at the end, no one's going to care. And I think they're on that trajectory at the minute. And you can see the wheels are starting to spin, and they're really picking up the momentum. And I think it's looking in the right direction for Rotherham and Steve Evans.
Yeah, it's funny. We'll come on to sort of the off the pitch antics now. It's funny because Bolton are actually higher than Rotherham in the league table. So Bolton are 10th. But actually, the amount of pressure and scrutiny that Bolton, Andy and Evatt are under, I don't know. When you put it like that, we're sort of praising Rotherham for being in 13th and pushing.
Yeah.
But the amount of, and rightly so, I guess, pressure and scrutiny on Bolton for being in 10th is an interesting sort of conversation. But I guess the bigger talking point is the pressure of Ian Evatt. As you mentioned, sort of the banners in the away end, chants in the away end, calling for his head, plenty of coverage on Sky, plenty of coverage on Twitter, on the different social channels as well. It's not been good enough really for Bolton in the past few weeks. 4 points of the playoffs. What does this do for Ian Evatt, Jamie?
And the issue you've got, I mean, you look at it and you go, well, his days are numbered. But I don't think it's that black and white for 2 reasons. One being the fact that he's been there for so long, and he's got that longevity, he's got that credit in the bank, and he deserves the time. And we mentioned that at the start of the season, when the last the last time this was really a strong call for Ian Evatt to be replaced. And then the other side to it is the vote of confidence he got from the ownership, and that was only a few weeks ago. I mean, it feels like a very long time ago, but it was around Christmas. It wasn't that long ago. Yeah. I mean, football changes very quickly, and a couple of results go the wrong way, and suddenly that vote of confidence can be revoked. But at the minute, I don't think you've seen enough bad since that vote of confidence from the ownership, and I don't think anything's changed, I guess is what I'm trying to say. That's a better way of putting it. That to change their standpoint from there, because if they were happy enough and willing to give Ian Evatt the time then they probably should be now. But the interesting thing really is these next few games. They've got Cambridge next in the league, and then they've got Huddersfield, Charlton, teams like that, and that Cambridge game becomes a big one, obviously playing a team so far down the table, and then you're playing Charlton and Huddersfield, who are obviously fighting for the same places that you expect Bolton to be, doing so more successfully, obviously. But yeah, so it's after the cup game they've got against Lincoln on Tuesday, which isn't going to matter. It's the Johnston Payne Papa John's whatever trophy, which obviously that the result in that doesn't matter one way or the other. But then it's Cambridge, Charlton, and Huddersfield with the space of 7 days, and that becomes, for me, I think, a really testing 3 games. And if he comes out of that without a win, I think then that's when the calls will become too much, even if the calls don't become too much with a defeat against Cambridge, which is definitely possible the way Bolton are playing at the minute.
Yeah, I fully agree, really. The next few results and the next few fixtures are going to be crucial. I think we need to give a bit more context in sort of what happened off the field at Rotherham, in the Ian Evatt's post-match comments.
At Bolton, yeah.
Bolton, yeah. Versus Rotherham. Ian Evatt's post-match comments. So firstly, he said quite a few things, really. Firstly, he said that it was sort of unfair, not to quote him, but it was unfair that he was getting all the criticism, and quote unquote, it's about time now. Maybe I called out the players sooner or later they have to take responsibility. And then he also mentions, if I can just get it up, I think my group of players are mentally fragile and they lack the fight of courage and energy.
And the other bit, obviously, to paraphrase like you did in the first instance there, he pretty much said, you can sack me all you like, it doesn't change the players that are out there. And when you're saying that, that is the counter argument to everything I said in terms of the two reasons why you would expect him to stay. In that, as soon as you start calling out your players and you lose the dressing room, it's only going in one direction, really, after that.
It's really, really damning for his players, you know. There's no... I don't know. I want there to be, but I don't think there is really a way out from that. When sort of you say these sort of stuff about your players, that the group of players are mentally fragile, especially out in the public as well. It's almost sort of defeating. If someone is mentally fragile, you know, you want a bit, you want that privacy, you want that help, and to just out them, and also what you said earlier, that sooner or later they have to take responsibility. It's about time I called them out.
I think it screams to me that's the last step, isn't it? You go through, maybe Evatt's got to a point now where he's gone, well, I've tried that, I've tried talking to them in the dressing room, I've tried talking to them one-to-one. The final straw, the final act you can do is sort of say it publicly and get the narrative out there that this is the problem, and that it's the last resort, if you like. It's if you think that should be done at any point. But I mean, I understand why he's done it, and I don't think you can blame managers 100%. There's players out there on the pitch. The manager you can have Pep Guardiola managing whatever any team in the world, but if the players aren't up to scratch or they're in a poor situation themselves, then there's not something you can do always in that sort of situation. But yeah, it's always a bad look, though. And back to you, Seb. It's always a bad look that a manager comes out and calls his players out so vividly.
Yeah, for sure. I'll be interested to see what happened comes Monday morning, because sometimes, you know, if this sort of thing happens, the club will speak with the manager, perhaps, you know, maybe worst case scenario, sack the manager. So Monday morning, I'll be interested to see what happens, and therefore then the rest of the week in terms of how things start to unfold at Bolton, that is. We'll move away from Bolton Rotherham and we'll chat a little bit about transfers in the league, and particularly one big transfer that I think is, going to cause some issues to some defences, perhaps in the league. We saw that last season, and if you've not guessed by now, we're chatting all about Joe Taylor, who of course was part of that on fire Lincoln attack last season that, you know, just missed out on the playoffs, but the run that went on, Taylor was pivotal in that side. And obviously, Jamie, you saw a lot of him last year. He's just signed for Huddersfield Town, £3 million, including add-ons. What do you reckon?
I think it's quite it's a complex thought, because if I say the second, I've got to preface it with the first bit before I say the second bit, because it sounds awful. Because the first bit is it's an incredible signing, and it's a statement of intent, is how I best described it, I think, because they can really push for the automatics with a player like Joe Taylor. I mean, he was. You mentioned, obviously, I saw him at Lincoln. That 16-game unbeaten run that you mentioned, Seb, at the back end of the season that almost got them into the playoffs. He was pivotal in that. His goals, he got his first career hat-trick in that run of games, and he was incredible, really. I mean, he scored 10 in 19 at Lincoln, the first half of the season, 12 in 24 at Colchester in League Two. So he did it at both League Two and League One level last season. Obviously, this season he's been struggling, 13 appearances, all from the bench. He's not started a single game this season, which is diabolical for a player of his quality. Obviously, in the Championship with Leyton Town, if they were not planning on playing him, giving him a bit of game time, they should have let him out on loan in the summer for me. But now he's got a chance to revitalise himself and get himself playing 90 minutes every week and get himself scoring goals, which the important bit is I believe really strongly that he will, because I mean he did absolutely superb at Lincoln, and there's no reason why in a Huddersfield team, which is don't get like beat around the bush, it's a better team than the Lincoln team last year. Huddersfield have got better players around him, so just to think what he can do in that Lincoln team which was a really good team, by the way. But what he can do in a better team now this season with Huddersfield, I think he could blow the numbers out of the water that he managed at Lincoln once he gets back up to speed in terms of the playing every week. But the other side to it, I have to say all that, the good stuff first, because the other side to it is the reported fee, which is 3 million. You'd obviously assume that includes add-ons, but if that is true, I think that was Peter Rourke from Football Insider that was reporting that figure. I don't know if it's been reported anywhere else. But if there's that the true figure, and if that includes promotion bonuses and all that sort of thing, they've been robbed blind, Huddersfield, because he's not worth 3 million.
Yeah.
The fact that a League One club can spend that sort of money, even if it's not all up front, which obviously it won't be, I mean, it's balmy, is it? I couldn't believe when I saw the figure. He's not, as much as how well he did at Lincoln last season, he's had one season. And to spend 3 million on a player that's had one season, who hasn't played all season so far, he's only played 13 games, all from the bench, as I mentioned. I think that's really bold, and I think they've paid over the mark for him. I mean, it's interesting to see if it ever gets to 3 million, but that's how I feel about it. That it's obviously an amazing signing, and that's the important bit, because the financial bit for us doesn't matter because we're just watching the football, and they've done so well in terms of getting him in because he's superb footballer at League One level. But the other side to it, in terms of the fee, it blew my mind a little bit how much they paid for him. But it's the real talking point of the week in terms of the transfers side of things.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think in terms of the quality he possesses, and he's going to up the Huddersfield attack a notch, really. You know, we saw the impact that he had at Lincoln when he went this time last year in January. He just sort of bumped them up at a level. The quality he brings, the goals, the assists, the all-round attacking play that he brings, no doubt is going to improve at Huddersfield. But absolutely agree with you. For a man that his highest level of play, you know, yes, he's played in the Championship this season, but that's only off the bench, as you said. In terms of consistently, League One, yes, he did really well last year.
Yeah.
Before that, yes, he did really well in League Two. He's not, I don't know, I agree with what you say. He's not really worth that 3 million that Huddersfield are reported to have spent on him.
Yeah, they reported 3 million,
Yeah, yes, he's a good player, but for a man that's just featured off the bench intermittently this season, and his best spell in terms of playing and goal scoring is in League One, it doesn't quite sit right with me. But ultimately, Huddersfield have got the money that they can bring these sort of players in. So, yeah, I think he will. Overall, you know, let's look at it positive. I think he will improve.
It's a great signing, yeah. There's no doubt about that.
Great signing, yeah. But it's just the money, and we saw that obviously over the summer with Stansfield coming in at Birmingham as well. In terms of the money being thrown around in League One these days. But it's certainly a statement of 10. I agree with you there, and definitely the push that they need in order to try and challenge the likes of Wrexham and Birmingham for these sort of the top two spots as well. So yeah, definitely will improve Huddersfield, but. Yeah, I do question the amount that has been spent on him.
To jump in on that, just to sort of clarify where we were getting that information from, it's Peter O'Rourke. He posted on Twitter on the 10th, Friday, that a deal is worth in excess of 3 million and is a huge statement of intent from Huddersfield. So that's what Peter O'Rourke's reporting, who was one of the people that broke the news, if you like, that the move was going to happen. So, I mean, there's obviously it's always undisclosed fees, but a deal worth up to just over 3 million it's crazy money.
Yeah, lots of money being thrown around in League One as well. We're going to take a short break, but we'll be back in just a few moments to discuss all the FA Cup ties and to answer some of your viewer questions. We'll see you shortly. Hello and welcome back to the League One Lowdown, brought to you by the Deck Podcast Network. I'm Seb Jones, joined as ever by Jamie Johnson. We're into the second half of our review episode this week. We've discussed the singular League One game that went ahead, and now we're going to discuss the more than singular, don't worry, League One, well, not League One games, but FA Cup games that went ahead involving League One sides. So we mentioned at the start a little bit of bitty, but we are going to cover all the League One sides that played in the third round of the FA Cup over the weekend. Varying results, to be fair. I guess we'll do it chronologically, shall we, Jamie? We'll start with a result I think no one really expected. Well, more drama off the field than on it in terms of Thursday night, Everton versus Peterborough. I think people expected the result, but it was more the stuff that happened off the field. It finished 2-0 to Everton in the end. I guess Peterborough could have capitalised on the crazy situation, but in the end, I think Everton's qualities just showed.
Yeah, I mean, in the end of the day, it's the quality that shows. Exactly the words there, Seb, that even despite sacking Sean Dyche the day of the game and Leighton Baines alongside Seamus Coleman being put in as interims, and apparently they didn't even pick the team. The team was picked by Sean Dyche, and then they tweaked a little bit tactically, which, I mean, it's absolutely ridiculous. The other note, obviously, I wanted to get your thoughts on this, Seb, because it seems to be, to my surprise, at least, a hotter topic than expected was Ashley Young, obviously plays for Everton. His son for Peterborough on the bench for this game. It was some great social media content out of that, which is what it is at the end of the day. They had the two of them on the pitch, but he didn't get brought on, Ashley Young's son, at the end of the game, even for a couple of minutes. And everyone was up in arms over this. Whereas I want to know what you think about that, because I think, I mean, we're not there, as Darren Ferguson said, the exact words, we're not a charity case. They're not, Peterborough aren't in the FA Cup to create a few news headlines. They're in there to try and win a game of football. And it was 1-0 right up until the 97th, 98th minute, something stupid like that. So I'm on Darren Ferguson's side. I've not said that for a few years. But what did you make to it?
Yeah, I agree. Yes, it would have been nice to sort of see a father-son duo on the pitch. You know, it's not something we see that often in football these days. Yes, it would have been nice, but I do agree with you, really. I do agree, yeah. You know, his son, Tyler, obviously plays for Peterborough. He's only 18 himself, only 18 years of age. In fairness, he's only sort of within that first team fold because of a few injuries. He's not regularly played. You know, yeah, he's been on the bench in the past couple of games, but that, as I said, that's to sort of cover injuries that we know Peterborough are struggling with. So technically, he's not a first team player. If we put it bluntly, he's not a first team player. So for me, he's not really sort of deserved that moment on the pitch in that FA Cup third round. If you think, you know, Peterborough have had to win 2 games to get there, and I don't know exactly, but I'd imagine Tyler Young has not been heavily involved in those 2 games. So in my eyes, doesn't necessarily deserve the chance to play in that round 3 game, which is obviously so coveted against a big side like Everton at a big stadium, sort of historic stadium like Goodison Park. So yeah, I am also on Darren Ferguson's side, as nice as it would have been to see them on the pitch together.
Yeah, I'm glad we're in agreement.
We're in agreement. It's a rarity these days, but yeah, we are in agreement. And weirdly, that was a Thursday night kickoff. So it sort of meant an extended weekend of FA Cup action. And then on the Friday, we saw probably what you class as a giant killing, just
an upset.
An upset, yeah, maybe not a giant killing, but an upset, yeah, is probably the best way of putting that. And that was between Wycombe Wanderers and obviously former League One side Portsmouth, now in the Championship. And Wycombe came on top of that one by 2-0. Obviously, Wycombe are flying in the league and so far flying in the FA Cup as well.
Yeah, no, exactly that. And this is a really good victory for them. I mean, now as Portsmouth obviously down the wrong end of the Championship and Wycombe up the right end of League One, they're very close to each other in terms of position, but it's always a good victory when you're beating a team from the division above, and on a cup game you never quite know who's going to win. So I was quite impressed by Wycombe here, and the main important bit, obviously, not just for us as a League One podcast, but in the overall picture, that they need to turn a result like this, which is a real confidence builder and a real boost. They need to turn that into consistency in the league, because obviously they struggled. They've been a little bit hot and cold over recent weeks. They lost to Huddersfield not too long ago, and it's a win like this that's a little bit out of the blue, a little bit of an upset that they need to turn into league form and league results. So they'll be hoping they can do that.
I guess just finally, sort of on this fixture, two goals within 27 minutes for Wycombe sort of sealed the progression into round 4. Second goal scored by Sonny Bradley, who only a couple of days before actually joined the club on loan from Derby. Just quickly, Jamie, what are your thoughts in terms of Sonny Bradley signing on loan for Wycombe Wanderers?
I mean, I don't think I've got really details for us. He's not someone I know an awful lot about. I'm happy to admit that. So I'm going to throw that back to you. I don't know. You asked me the question, tells me that you've got something to say about it.
It is,
Because I mean,
yeah.
yeah, go on. I'll let you go. Yeah.
Yeah, well, to me, again, it's not someone I know too well, but I just think in terms of where Wycombe are at, I know they've had obviously we all know how well they're doing it in the league so far this year. They've had a couple of their best players recalled, and a couple of players in defence as well. So I think signing Sonny Bradley just sort of fills that gap a little bit. It's a reliable centre half that obviously achieved promotion with Derby last year.
I mean, obviously, the main bit, the only bit I would say is just the experience, isn't it?
Yeah, of
he's
course.
Been around a bit, and that's you look in and you go, it's always good to add that experience head. Yeah.
Yeah, and to make such an impact on his debut as well. I'm sure I did not mean to throw you under the bus there, by the way, but to see, I was like, oh, you only.
Well, I was thinking, well, we got these listener questions, and I put them on we have a little notes to pull back the curtain. We have a document that we share between the two of us before the episode, and I got sent the questions. I put them on the document. I'm thinking I shouldn't have bothered. I should have just read them out from my phone and not give Seb the pre-warning of what I'm going to ask him in the second half of and later on in this podcast. But what goes around comes around is all I say, James.
Yeah, well, listeners, if you've got feedback or an opinion on Wycombe signing Sonny Bradley from Derby, let us know.
Something more than I've got.
Yeah,
they've been experienced.
Probably will be Bob and Jamie, but if you perhaps
the place to go. The place to go for transfer updates, you'll like my plug seamlessly in here. It is obviously our YouTube feed, and we mentioned at the top, Sam, there was a nice little video promoting our YouTube, and I'll be trying to get the subscribers up. Obviously, you'll be notified for every single episode, and it obviously helps us too. But what you will get if you subscribe is notifications when one of us do our weekly transfer updates, which we're doing throughout January. It was Sam last week. I'm doing it this week on Thursday, Friday. I'll be reviewing the transfers of the week, and it's a great way to stay updated so you don't miss transfers like I did with a couple over this past week. And that is, in seriousness, a really important place to go for that sort of, as well as our usual episodes, some transfer news as well.
Sounds as though Jamie has to listen to a few of our versions that we are going to be producing just to stay up there, you know. And this is Jamie's final appearance on the League One Lowdown as well. So
any Wycombe experts trying to take over for me? Welcome.
Moving swiftly on, we'll move on to a team that we know all well about, and that's Lincoln City. We'll come and save your bacon a little bit. Lincoln City played in the FA Cup away at Birmingham. Birmingham clinches 2-1. It was a very early goal that gave the home side the lead, but Lincoln, I guess the main talk from them is they finally scored.
I know, I couldn't believe it. It took them, I wrote the number down, 468 minutes.
Between Joe You're pulling it back now.
Between Joe Van McCarmer's injury time consolation penalty and Rico Hackett's goal on the 21st of December against Reading. And that was a staggering stat. And the goal itself, as I mentioned from the penalty spot, was nothing more than a consolation in the end, as Birmingham scored in the first minute and Lyndon Dykes scored a really nice goal in the second half to make it 2-0. And that goal at the end, it was looking at the people talking to people that were there and what's come out of it, that Lincoln were improved in the second half, but you don't get anything for an improved performance when you come out of it on the wrong end, especially in the cup game. And their bad run continues over recent weeks. But finally, a goal is the silver lining to go along with the ever deepening cloud at the LNR Stadium.
Yes. Well rescued there, Jamie. And that does mean, of course, that Birmingham City are through. As I mentioned, it was an early goal from Ayubu Yokomo. I'm going to start that again because I've just absolutely butchered that. But it was Ayubu Yokoyama. I think I've got that right. If I haven't, then I apologise. But he got things off to a cracking start, flying start 32 seconds in before there was an equaliser from a slightly easier name to pronounce, Lyndon Dykes. so not an equaliser, a second goal led to. Oh, we're having a poor effort this episode. But Lyndon Dykes,
whatever I've got, it's contagious.
It clearly is. Lyndon Dykes up on the tally. We'll move on quickly before it all just gets a whole heap worse. But Exeter City actually produced a shock of their own at home against Oxford United. Oxford, of course, formerly of this patch, now in the Championship. But Exeter victorious in this one, 3-1. Were you surprised by this one, JJ?
Yeah, I mean, there's no. I'm not going to beat around the bush. It was a really big surprise and one of the bigger upsets of the weekend. Obviously, Plymouth, their victory at Brentford, rightfully so, will get the headlines in terms of the best and biggest upset. But this for Exeter is fantastic. It's their first time into the fourth round for 44 years. They've done superbly well. And to beat an Oxford team, obviously Oxford promoted last season, new manager in recent weeks in Gary Rowett. It's a really good result. I mean, Oxford, their main focus is staying in the Championship, but you never say no to a cup run. But for Exeter, it's really fantastic for them. And when you're seeing teams who are in the lower divisions of the EFL and into non-league who are struggling, they're not up the top of League One, and they're in solidly sort of mid-table. They're not going to go down. They're not going to go up. They're one of those sort of teams. So a cup run is a real reward and something you always trying to get. And yeah, all credit to Exeter. I watched the highlights of that one, and they seemed to play really well and deserved their 3-1 win. So yeah, all credit to them, as I mentioned, and a really history-making victory for them.
Yeah, for sure. Massive plaudits to Gary Caldwell's side. As you mentioned, great to see them enter round four. Probably, yeah. Yes, the Plymouth-Brentford one will get the headlines, but you're right in saying that this is a more surprising one, considering Exeter. They're not really high flying in the league, but great to see them sort of beat Oxford of the Championship. Reading, Burnley as well. Reading couldn't quite get the look that Exeter do. They lost by the same scoreline this time against Burnley, but they did need extra time, so it finished 1 apiece after 90 minutes. And I guess sort of it's one of those that the quality of the opposition just proved too much for the League One side, Jamie.
Yeah, well, when you get into extra time, it's the legs, isn't it, that makes a difference, and you always see more the difference in quality. Obviously, to a bigger scale with Spurs against Tamworth, when they get into extra time, the floodgates open, and the quality you've got on the bench and the quality you've got in terms of the fitness is on a level up. And that came good in the end. There was a proper goalkeeping howler in this one as well.
Oh, yeah.
But yeah, it's not a...
Yeah. It was in Reading's
they've made a good
so
account for themselves, though. That was what I was going to add before I pass back to Seb. They've lost, obviously, 3-1, and 3-1 looks worse than it was. Getting to extra time, they've done themselves. At least they can look back and say, we've really put our all into that. But yeah, on the goalkeeping howler, Seb.
Yeah, well, of course, that went in favour of Reading, so I'm sure they'll not have too many squabbles about that. And in the end, that's what forced the extra time. But you're right, when it does get to that extra half an hour, it's all about the legs and who can last the longest, really, and sort of it's a chance for the bigger sides in this case, Burnley, to bring off the bench the sort of the best players, and that's what they did. Ian Fleming came off and bagged 2 within 10 minutes, so you can't really complain. But just in terms of that quality anyway, Burnley have John Egan and Joe Worrell at the back, and Ashley Barnes, Lyle Foster and Jay Rodriguez up top. These are all sort of players that a few years ago were all playing in the Premier League, and I guess Reading have matched them as far as they could go as well. And then there's another one to shout out, Leyton Orient at Derby. That was actually postponed, and interestingly, that game obviously postponed due to the weather, but that game is going to be played on Tuesday night, so quite a short turnaround. Same one with Mansfield and Wigan as well. Quite a short turnaround in that one. I guess because they've only got so many limited windows, they can play the game.
And Preston Charlton's the one to add into that as well.
Yes, of course, yeah. But
a lot of postponements. Obviously, we mentioned the fact that the league games have sort of been culled. Happened to the FA Cup as well, and there's some catching up to do for certain teams.
Yeah, I'm sure it'll be a bit of a hindrance. But, of course, the FA Cup draw has been done. It was done on Sunday night. I'm just going to try and get it up here. But
as you do that, the 2 games on Sunday that are worth remembering while you're talking about while you're find the draw itself. Ipswich beat Bristol Rovers and Crystal Palace beat Stockport. Eze, first-minute goal there. So no upsets in either of those two. Perhaps I think Stockport was one you looked at in terms of that being a potential for an upset with how well Stockport are doing and Crystal Palace being a little bit having different things to focus on than the FA Cup. But in the end, Ipswich and Crystal Palace, the two Premier League sides, got through against League One opposition on time of recording today on Sunday.
So, yeah, and interestingly, I've now got the draw. Actually, all the League One sides through are all at home. So I'm just going to mention the only games involving the League One sides. Leyton Orient or Derby is to be played, and the winner of that one will play Manchester City at home. Birmingham City will play Newcastle United at home. Mansfield Town or Wigan, the winner of that tie, will face Fulham at home. Exeter City will play Nottingham Forest at home. And then if Charlton do beat Preston in that tie, they will play Wycombe at home. And I think that is it in terms of League One involvement in the FA Cup ties. So interestingly, that actually just looking at that one
Some
on
good
paper,
draws in there.
good draws, and they've all got the home tie as well, which is what you all want, really. You want your fans getting behind you, getting that atmosphere, and making it a bit of a fortress in the will now be the fourth round of the FA Cup. A lot of big sides, as you say. Good draws overall. What do you reckon?
Yeah, exactly that. I mean, obviously the one that jumps off the paper you read off there is Birmingham Newcastle. That's a Premier League game 10 years ago, and it's obviously now in the FA Cup, and two teams that have gone in opposite directions. But that'll be a really interesting game, and you hope Leyton Orient can cause an upset in itself against Derby, and they reward obviously the best team of last season, Manchester City. So it's a really interesting couple of games, those two in particular. Perhaps an old League One clash with Wycombe and Charlton in there as well, and Nottingham Forest they're up right at the top of the Premier League. It's not it's a really not too shabby game, is how you would describe it for Exeter. So I mean, there's some really good ones in there, and that's what you want. You want to get into this round, getting into the fourth, the fifth round, and you're expecting those big teams to be coming out, and for all the teams involved against those high league opposition, it'll be a great day for the supporters, and that's what it's all about. The magic of the FA Cup, as much as decisions off the field, try to distill it.
Here, Jamie. Here. We'll move on away from the FA Cup, and of course, when those round 4 ties are played, we will have coverage of them, especially those that involve a League One club as well. And just sort of to finish off the episode, we've got a few listener questions that me and Jamie are just going to bounce off between us. So we'll just take it in turns. I'll start to you, Jamie. Who's the worst side that you've seen so far this season?
I felt like that was a difficult one because obviously you immediately look down the teams at the bottom end of the table, and obviously rightfully so, because they're down there for a reason. In terms of the teams I've seen either in person or that they're televised games, I think you can't look otherwise than a Burton have been for the most part, obviously bottom of the league, and they're there for a reason. So I think that's quite an easy, an obvious answer there. I've got a prediction for what you're going to say. If something you talked about last week was how you described a certain team you saw last week, with my expectation for your pick. But yeah, I'll go for the obvious one and bottom of the league, Burton.
Yeah, I would agree. In fairness, I've seen Burton play that. I wasn't too impressed, but that was not going to be my pick. My pick's going to be Crawley, given that Barnsley have put 6 past them across 2 games so far this season, and honestly, we played them over the Christmas break, and it was 3-0, but it should have been about 5 or 6 itself. They were pretty poor when we saw them.
Yeah, no, I think you explained that last week, didn't you, in terms of the fact that they were just so poor. Yeah. And there was no surprise in terms of your selection there. But that brings us on to the next question, which involves those 2 teams. It was, do you think any of the bottom 4, and thank you everyone who did send questions in, do you think any of the bottom 4 will stay up? Obviously, Burton and Crawley in there, and Cambridge and Shrewsbury sandwiched in between. Do any of those stay up, Seb?
No, I think it'll stay as it is. It's not like it has been in recent years where, I don't know, there's been a side sort of just hovering above that relegation, and I can see, even if any of these sides do go on a run, I just can't see it being a good enough run to get them out of the position that they're in. I can, if we look at the three teams above it, the relegation zone, Northampton, Peterborough and Bristol Rovers, I can see them all. It's just because they've had a poor season so far that I can see them pulling away massively. So then the gap just gets bigger and bigger, and then it becomes a bit of an impossible mission for either of the bottom four to escape. But yeah, I don't think it will change. I think the four will remain as it is.
Yeah, and not to be boring, but I'm going to say exactly the same thing. I think I can find reasons for all those teams just above the drop zone to stay up, and I can't find reasons why the teams below them will do enough to get above them. Obviously, Bristol Rovers, the new manager, and there's a bit more energy around the place now. Peterborough United, as much as they're struggling, at the end of the day, they will have enough quality to stay up. And Northampton, Wigan as well, just above that. I think they've just got too much in them to slip below the teams down at the in the bottom four.
No, I agree, and yeah, we're on the right, singing off the same hymn sheet, Jamie. That's what we like to see.
Won't last long, I'm sure.
We weren't early on in this podcast if you were listening, but we are now. So on to me now. Who's the best set of fans you've seen, either in person or sort of from different clips you've seen on social media as well?
I think that's another difficult one. I was trying to find some sort of stats on who took most away fans and that sort of thing, but I couldn't seem to find any. I know for Lincoln I'd go for, and the ones that are brought in terms of the most vocal, the biggest support have been those local games, which has been in particular Mansfield, and I think they travel fairly well in most respects. So that's a bit of a rogue chat. I'm going to go different just to sort of create something a little bit different between the two of us, and I'll go for, based off the fact of Lincoln, I'll go for Mansfield.
I'm going to go really basic here and go. We've not, well, in terms of from a personal experience, Barnsley have not played Birmingham yet so far this season, but the other one are Wrexham. Obviously, they all travel really well, and we know the reasons why. But nevertheless, they still bring support, they still bring noise, and both games have been cracking. So that's sort of added to the atmosphere and their level of noise as well. So I go Wrexham for
and Stockport, another one I'd throw into the mix as well. I've been to the Edgeley Park, and it's a proper ground. It's an old-fashioned ground, and they make a lot of noise there, and they travel well too. So they're another one I'd throw into my mix there, and that brings us on a couple of questions to go. I'll leave the one. I'm going to do them in a little bit different order to the sheet you're reading off, Seb. I'm going to ask you the one that interests you the most in terms of the Barnsley question. And Adam Phillips, very simply, will he stay? At the end of January, will he still be a Barnsley player?
Firstly, I hope so, because in terms of what he's brought while he's been at the club, I think it's been sensational. I think he will stay at the club. Yeah, I think the relationship he's got with Davis Keeler-Dunn, I think sort of the form he's on now, I think he's well settled. He's been up at ours for a few years now, but I think he'll stay. Yeah, I think he'll stay. I think in terms of what's around the club at the minute, in terms of like sporting director, our CEO, they're saying that we want to improve it, and we know that we're gonna to do that. We have to keep a hold of some of our players rather than sell that we have done in previous years, and I think they're going to learn from the previous mistakes and do the best to keep Adam Phillips. So yeah, I think he will stay. I know he's attracted a bit of championship interest. Preston.
Yeah, I think it's going
one
off
of the
Football
clubs.
Insider reporting Swansea and Preston are the two teams at the minute, so they're competing for him.
Yeah, but I think he will stay by the end of it. I won't be good if he did move on, because he's a good player, but I don't know if he's good enough for the championship in truth. But he is. I think he'll stay.
Yeah, I agree. I think at the end of the season, if you don't go up through the playoffs, obviously most likely, I think he'll move on in the summer, because I think he's got the potential and the quality to be a real solid championship midfielder. And if those couple of clubs we mentioned that have been linked, or some different clubs perhaps, if they come in the summer, I can see him moving on. But as far as January is concerned, no would be my answer, and I think he will stay at Barnsley.
Yeah, I agree. I agree with that point as well. Then just to sort of finalise things off, obviously you may or may not have seen. If you haven't, I definitely do suggest doing so. Our team of the season so far, mine and Callum's were in the last review, last preview episode. I beg your pardon, and then Jamie, yourself, and Sam's were in a little video beforehand as well. That was covered on the Deck Podcast Network. So if you are subscribed, you can go back to have a look. And obviously, if you've not, then feel free to just check on those. But we did release our team of the season so far. Who was your standout of the 11 that you've picked, Jamie, in your team?
Yeah, and I think there's another one. There's always 2 or 3. And you always look at the top end of the pitch naturally. And if I'm going to distill it down to one, I'm going to go for Louis Barry. Obviously, he's moved on now. But in terms of that first half of the season, which is when we did the team of the season so far, was at the halfway mark. And for me, Louis Barry has been the best player in the division so far. So even though he's moved on to pastures new, it's Louis Barry for me, best player in League One so far this season.
Yeah, I would agree, actually. Yeah, I would agree. I think it's something like 19 goals or something. Oh, no, not 19 goals. 15, 15 goals, I think it was. Yeah, something like that. A lot of goals in terms of the impact that they had when Stockport were at the top end at the start of the season. He was a big focal point, and not to sound boring, but I am going to agree with you on that one as well. Thank you very much for your questions. If you have sent them in, we do sort of like doing this, engaging with our listeners. So I'm sure there'll be another roll call for these very soon. But I think that concludes everything for this review episode. So thanks as ever to Jamie for joining us. Just another reminder to hit that subscribe button on YouTube. Give us a like. Make sure you're following us on whatever podcast provider you are listening off as well. Sam and Callum will be back later on in the week for their preview episode. Don't worry, we're back to normal, a full roster of League One fixtures, and then we'll be back as normal this time next week to review all the outings from the weekend. So that's it for me and Jamie, but we'll see you in the next one. See you later.